morning.
If I were to ask you a question, what is the opposite of fragile? How would you answer that question?
Tough.
Tough?
Resilient.
Resilient? Strong?
Sturdy.
All right. I'm going to tell you that you're wrong this morning. All right.
Wow.
So the idea of fragile or fragility is something that's easily broken when presented with stress or pressure or chaos or something like that, right? Well, when we think about the idea of robustness or toughness or strength, that's actually not technically the opposite of fragility, because all that toughness or resiliency means is that you're able to withstand the pressure, the stress, and the chaos. But there's a different concept that I want to introduce to you today. It's one that I have been researching. I'm not all the way there yet. I'm reading a book by a guy named Nassim Taleb. He's written a book called Anti-Fragility. And what he says anti-fragility actually means, it's a characteristic of a system or a person that doesn't just withstand stress and pressure and chaos, but something that actually gets stronger with stress or chaos or pressure. The example that he uses in the book, and I find it quite interesting, is the example of this mythical monster called a hydra. Does everybody remember what a hydra is? So a hydra is basically a dragon. And in ancient Greece, there was a myth of a guy, I can't remember his name currently, but he went to fight this dragon. And what he did is he eventually, through this battle, cut off the dragon's head. And he thought he was victorious. The dragon slumps over and falls down. But then, unbeknownst to him, shockingly I would say, the dragon begins to revive and pop up, and all of a sudden, instead of where one head was, there were two. And so the hero, he takes this now there's two, so I'll cut off some more heads. And when he keeps cutting off these heads, all that keeps happening is that more and more heads begin to appear. So cut off 2, there's 4. Cut off 4, there's 8. Cut off 8, there's now 16 heads. So this dragon, this monster, this hydra is a good example of this idea of anti-fragility. When it was faced with stress, with pressure, with its head being cut off, frankly, it got stronger. It got stronger. Now, what the author says in this book, and this idea, is that human beings, and a lot of other things, systems and things like that, have this characteristic of anti-fragility. I'm experiencing it a little bit today. I was at the gym yesterday, and I've been working out this week for the first time in a long time, and I feel very fragile right now because my back is kind of sore, my legs are sore, trying to stretch is like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced. When you start getting back in the gym, your just body hurts, right? But the cool thing about our bodies is that instead of deteriorating through working out, through lifting weights, we actually get stronger. And one of the cool things that I learned recently is that instead of your body anticipating the exact amount of weight that you lifted the time before, so yesterday I was deadlifting and I tried to do 225, couldn't quite make it, but I did about 185 or something like that. But what your body does, it actually gets ready not for 185, but it gets ready for 225 the next time. So our bodies anticipate lifting a stronger weight. Is that me? Sorry. My apologies. So our bodies anticipate lifting a stronger weight than it did before. This is a beautiful thing about human beings. Angela, you were talking about stress and trauma, and one of the interesting things that we know about is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So a person who's under constant stress, without any reprieve, that causes some real psychological damage, right? And it's physiological, it's psychological, it's emotional, all these things that can happen to us. But there's another concept that's similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. It's called post-traumatic growth. Anybody heard of that term before? Post-traumatic growth. Well, the idea is that our body, and it plays into anti-fragility, but it's the idea that our bodies need stress in small amounts, incrementally, with periods of recovery. And if we have those kinds of outcomes in our life, then we'll actually get stronger. It's the idea behind weightlifting, all those kinds of things. So post-traumatic growth. Now, what happens oftentimes is we live in a society that's pretty crazy, and so all we have are stresses. Right? All we have is stress in our life, and so we don't have the opportunity to have some time of recovery. There's no recovery drink for the stress of life. It'd be nice if there was. Then we could live a little bit more energized rather than just, we're falling over drinking coffee every day because we haven't taken the time to recuperate and take care of ourselves. But this idea of anti-fragility is one that I find just so interesting as I think about my own life. And it has some implications for us, I think, as people. Do we intentionally stress ourselves for the sake of growth? Do we decide to do hard things so that we can do harder things tomorrow? It's a really important question that we can ask ourselves, because it's so easy to become stagnant. It's so easy to become more fragile because we don't take risks, because we don't stress our bodies or our psyches or our emotions. And we can become we can become weaker as we go, so that any kind of trauma, any kind of disagreement, any kind of issue that we face just wrecks our lives, or wrecks our day, or wrecks our moment. And to be honest with you, I don't want to live that way. I'd rather be not tough, but anti-fragile. I'd rather the stresses of my life actually work in me to make me the strongest person that I could be. And the great thing about this idea is that as we look at it, it's really intuitive. We actually know that it's true. And so I would encourage all of you today, as I close this speech, to think about what you can do today to exercise your anti-fragility. Thank you very much.
Wow.